right, now I'd like to introduce today's speaker, Doug Pick. Doug graduated from the McIntyre School. He was with IBM for 19 years, where he joined. Then he joined Central Fidelity Bank, where he was a senior vice president, and in the small world department, he worked there with Nancy Everhart. He spent 12 years at Capital One in a wide variety of roles, but the one that kind of led me to think about him as a speaker and to make him so perfect for the problems that are for running a place like Feedmore is that he has a knack for running large organizations with lots of diverse people involved. In 9/11, Capital One was tapped to run the 9/11 telethon, the national telethon. He ran that. They had 18 projects, 45 sub-projects, 6 corporate partners, 77 call centers, 25,000 volunteers, and they generated $75 million through 1.5 million phone calls. And Doug was given that with a few weeks to spare in planning it and pulled it all together. He also started a company in China when he was there that became one of the 6 best ranked employer companies in China, and a software development company. And that led him to
Please dial extension 287, Brett. Please dial extension 287.
Sorry.
That led him to Feedmore, where he runs an organization that serves 29 counties and 5 cities, has 100 employees, 1,600 volunteers, 300 suppliers, 400 corporate supporters, 14,000 donors. They serve 200,000 food insecure people in Central Virginia by distributing 30 million pounds of food and 25 million meals every year. And so I'd like to welcome Doug Pick, the CEO of Feedmore.
Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Hello to all my friends. I know a lot of you out there. Stan, thank you so much. Gary, thank you. Heck, Gary's worth the price of admission himself, isn't he? all those tidbits and everything else. That's fantastic. And Stan, it's good to be with the Wahoo. We'll see how we fare against the cursed Hokies. You never know. We at least had one good year. And I hope everyone's doing well. I hope your coffee's in front of you. I see a few bowls of cereal. And I told Stan I might be more entertaining if we did this at cocktail hour, but I also get that having coffee in front of you helps you keep awake, and that's a good thing. So it's great to be alive. It is great to be alive, and it's great to be with you all today. I got that love of life from my grandfather, speaking of seniors, who lived to be 108 years old. And every day of his life, he woke up and said, "Oh, it's great to be alive." So hopefully I still carry some of that on. He was a fabulous man. And I think it's so important these days to keep your gratitude list in front of you, right? Not the least of which is being alive, but all the other great things that we have going for us. And let's always remember to have gratitude for that, and not just the things that may be challenging us. So if you will, please allow me to set the table with a little walk down memory lane. Most of you will get this. So it's 1967, and it's the movie The Graduate. And our friend Benjamin Braddock, young Benjamin Braddock, has his parents have put together a graduation cocktail party for him. Congratulations. And one of the friends of theirs, Mr. McGuire, pulls him aside, right, and has some advice for him. He walks him over to the pool and says, "Benjamin, I have one word for you." And of course, it's plastics, right? So what a classic line. And so the word for us today, one word for you, and the word today is ambiguity. Ambiguity. Living in ambiguity and leading in ambiguity. Stan said I have about 35 years of corporate experience, and indeed I do. And we knew an awful lot of what we were working on and what we were doing. And it's the damnedest thing when you come here to Feedmore or Food Bank, because the main things you need to function, you have no idea when and where they're coming from. So I'm not sure when and where my food's coming in. I'm not sure when and where my funds are coming in. My workforce, 2/3 of my workforce are volunteers, and I never quite know when the next disaster is coming around the corner. So now take that list of ambiguity and look at what happens when a pandemic hits. So most disasters we have cover about 3 counties or half a state. It could be a hurricane, it could be a flood, it could be a tornado. And all the food banks come together and we help each other out. By the way, there are 7 food banks in Virginia. I happen to be the chairman for the next couple of years of the Federation of Virginia Food Banks. There are 205 food banks who are part of Feeding America, the umbrella group across the country. And so all of a sudden this pandemic hits and it's a disaster for every food bank. So it completely stresses the system. At the same time, as you all well know, it totally disrupted supply chains. And all of a sudden, where are we going to get our food and where is everyone else going to get their food? At the same time, it affects the economy and increases just enormous unemployment, excuse me, tremendous unknowns, and of course, for a while affected the stock market. So that's the kind of ambiguity that we live in here and ones that we have to learn to traverse through. So as we are traversing through this ambiguity, if you'll allow me, let's take the next 30 minutes and I'm going to do a quick review of Feedmore just to give you a sense of what it is, its size and scale. I'm going to talk about how we handled things in the spring and how we fared. Then going to look to what we see in the fall and winter. Going to take a chronological approach here. And then we're going to go look out the next 10 or 15 years. So I'm always fascinated by that. And I think it's important as a core backbone anchor organization for this community. It's important that we continue to look way out there so that we don't get caught unaware. So the thumbnail sketch of Feedmore. So Stan kind of hit it. It's Central Virginia's core hunger relief organization. There are 29, we cover 29 counties and 5 cities. It goes to the east side of Charlottesville, the south side of Fredericksburg, the west side of Williamsburg, and all the way down North Carolina. Most people aren't familiar that we have that kind of scope and size. It's very rural and very, very urban at the same time, so it adds to some of the complexity. Last year, around spring, we were serving about 150,000 folks, about 35,000 children who were food insecure, meaning not sure their next meal is going to come from. So those were good numbers relative to us, and our peak of issues in 2017, we were up to about 210,000 folks and 55,000 children. It's unfortunate, but the folks we serve are the first to get hit by a recession, the last to come out. So finally, in 18 and 19, they were coming out of it, and then boom, the pandemic hit. We've got, for those who haven't been here, about 100,000 square foot of space. We've got 3 large hubs in in Farmville, in South Hill, and in Northern Neck. It's kind of a hub and spoke operation. It's really a logistics business, for those of you who might understand that, given the amount of food we move. So last year, about 25 million meals, or about 32 million pounds. So it's substantial. It is at scale. To do that, we have about 95 employees. We have over 200 volunteers at a normal time, over 200 volunteers in a day. So it's really quite extensive and really quite something. So if you take it all into account, we're kind of a medium to large food bank, what's considered a medium large food bank. We are a very large Meals on Wheels organization. We serve now about 1,800 seniors a week. And then we have the stunning Steve and Sarah Baird Community Kitchen, which produces about 20,000 meals in a week. I mean, our smallest pot is about yay big. It's a big production kitchen. And the tours we have just kind of blow people's minds because they have no idea what we do here and how much it takes to pull it off. So it's quite something. It is considered by the experts to be the country's most complex food assistance organization in the U.S. So we take great pride in that and take great pride in trying to keep it on the rails. Another way we look at ourselves, let's talk about brand for a minute. We all get brand, and Capital One, we used to say brand was a promise kept. I like to refer to brand essence, which is what you really do, So one example is Volvo. We know that they sell cars. They think they sell safety. We know that Harley Davidson sells motorcycles. They think they sell adventure. And Disney, I might say they're an amusement park. They'd be offended by that. They think they sell magic. So what does Feedmore do? We couldn't get it down to one word. But we think we nourish the community and we empower lives. So we nourish the community with food, but it has to be healthy food. When I got here, we were moving about 13% produce. Our goal is 40%, and we're damn near getting to about 35% of what we move is produce. So many of our folks suffer from diet-related diseases. We really must try to be part of the solution there. And we believe we have to nourish the souls of the volunteers who come. It's a huge volunteer opportunity for this community, and we owe it to them to nourish their souls in a way that makes them walk away feeling better about themselves and better about their community. And then finally, we really want to empower lives. I used to say, we feed the line and we'd love to shorten the line. By empowering folks, we want to look to collaborate. We're very large, and as much as we can collaborate with other nonprofits to help them out, food isn't their only issue. It's rent, it's medicine, it's transportation. As much as we can come together to lift them up and give them that hand up, that people really don't aspire to live off food stamps and us. They're really only there at a time of need. Let me talk about our clients a little more, if you wouldn't mind. Let's bring them into the room with us. So about 65% of them have income. They just don't have enough income. Truly, they're the working poor. Between 65 and 69% of them every month make decisions between food and medicine, between food and utilities, between food and transportation, between food and housing on a daily basis. Speaking of ambiguity, right? Speaking of not being sure. They use us about 1 to 7 times a year. They use us episodically. I've talked about them being on food stamps, what's called SNAP and us. A lot of folks don't realize that food stamps or SNAP on average is about $4.50 a day per person. A lot of folks think it's a lot more than that. It's a thing called the food stamp challenge. Try living for a week on $4.50 a day. It can be done. It's not much fun. It's very challenging. The quality of food isn't great. And again, not a life people aspire to. They really want to get through all this and get to the other side. But with Stan's help, we're going to take a couple minutes here and ask a client to join us in the room by way of video. So we'll see how good Mr. Maupin is on his technology here. Stan?
Every year, millions of working American families and their children hide their struggle with hunger. But just because you can't see it doesn't mean it's not there. With over 72 billion pounds of food going to waste each year, it doesn't need to be that way. Feeding America is a network of 200 food banks, 60,000 food pantries, and 2 million volunteers. We work with farmers, retailers, and manufacturers to get people the food they need. Hunger hides, but we can help. Let's end hunger in America.
Thank you, Stan. Every time that moves me. Can you imagine how many folks are out there right now in the midst of all this, going through those very things? We're not sure the next meal is coming from. Can you imagine, now obviously that lady was an actor, but can you imagine in real life the number of hotel workers who don't have a job right now to even get that bag of bagels that was going to be thrown out? This is what we're up against, and this is what we do. So how does one prepare for all this ambiguity? How does one as a leader go about this? And I was blessed in my career at IBM in the early 90s to be asked to be part of a small think tank with a fellow named Peter Schwartz. He wrote a book called The Art of the Long View. It's a little dated now, but it's still a fascinating read. And Peter was all about scenarios and scenario planning. And he would say, obviously, you have to have at least 2 scenarios and no more than 5. But we had found, even in the early 90s, that forecasting based on historical data just really wasn't going to tell the tale. And so Stan got into scenario planning, and you'd find that out of 3 scenarios, the truth will be found, or what will eventually occur is probably found in the middle of all 3 of those. So I've become a big fan of scenario planning. And then if you add to that guiding principles, which we put in place very quickly this spring, and to a certain extent have in place already, but these principles can really apply to anybody who's in the midst of leading through ambiguity. One was, you've got to figure out where things are going. So we're always looking to create canaries in the coal mine and things that might indicate where things are going. So we use our website, people looking for assistance. We use all of our agencies. There's 272 agencies. They tell us what's going on. And very particularly and very quickly, we use our front desk that tells us how many calls are coming in. And I'll just quickly tell you that on a normal week, it's about 50. Last spring, it quickly zoomed to 150 calls looking for assistance in a week. And at its peak in May, it was 250 calls a week. That doesn't include people going to the website or to the agencies asking for help. So that was a 5x surge in a matter of about 3 weeks. It was quite stunning to see. And as you might imagine, the volume came in right after that. I think you have to stay true to your core competencies. And we at Feedmore try to do that. We distribute food, right? We try to empower lives, but you got to stick to your core competencies under pressure. Don't try to invent too much new. Use the infrastructure. Dance with what brought you there, right? So our infrastructure is 272 agencies. And remember that you've got to stick to scale, at least in our case. We work at 32 million pounds, and a lot this spring I had to be aware of the seduction of wanting to say yes to so many people who offered help. Caterers who had 200 sandwiches. One of them got very upset with me that I wouldn't take his 200 sandwiches. Well, and I had to explain, well, that takes a truck, and it takes a driver, it takes a manager to get involved. And you take that away, you're getting in the way of me feeding 5,000 folks. Now, what I was able to do was get those sandwiches over to the Richmond public school system. So it all worked out. But you can't take your do-gooder tendencies and let that get into the way of what you've created to your infrastructure. And most importantly, and this happens all the time here, this is a standard, but especially in these times of pressures, you get absolutely no points for martyrdom and drama. I've seen so many folks get to a place where it's, oh, let me tell you how hard I'm working. Oh, the sky is falling. And the answer is no. Think it through. Be ready for it. Work with things in a calm, planned, centered, as my friend Dr. Gene Gaze would say, in a centered fashion. And it really makes things much more productive and quite honestly a lot more fun, and it produced an awful lot of pride as we got through all this and the way we went about it. So those are some of the things I think all of us really need to think about anytime you face pressure and emergencies. So how do we fare? Everyone wants to know how we fared this spring. It was on March 2nd that we got a hold of the VCU Health System PowerPoint deck, a little ahead of time for most people, that said there could be as much as 9 million cases and 500,000 deaths. And we went, whoa, how's that even going to be possible? Even if it's a third of it, that's going to affect us and affect others. And most unfortunately, it's, gosh, we're well past 5 million now, and 175,000 deaths. It just keeps going, hard to keep track of. But that helped us understand quickly the next day. The senior leadership team gathered around and created as much as we could our scenarios, and particularly worked on our mitigation strategies. And at the same time, we put in place a situation team. Normally you'd put them in a war room, but that situation team was about 8 or 9 folks. It was cross-functional. led by our brilliant CEO, Rick Goliath. And they met every day at 2:00. Things are fast moving, and what can really get in the way of this is redundant, inefficient, inaccurate communications, and a lot of things can go wrong. You haven't got time or enough chances to do it incorrectly. So that was very important to have that situation team. The drivers, as much as we knew it, were the virus. And then the variables that we put our mitigation, and we've learned a lot more about other drivers, but the variables we put our mitigation strategy around were our staff, our volunteers, our agencies, our food sources, and our revenue streams. So let's talk about what we did and how we put it in place. The staff, the usual safety protocols, buddy system, split in half home, half here. So if someone got sick, we could always be covered. We declared essential workers in the warehouse and the kitchen. They, of course, got essential worker and hero pay, which they're still receiving. All the cleaning and all those types of things. And the senior leadership teams come in every day. And all that's been working out very, very well. Volunteers, 2/3 of your workforce. What happens if they all go away? Our corporate volunteers, which are very substantial, were gone within 3 days. Our senior volunteers, at least half of them, it took about 2 to 3 weeks for them to dissipate due to an abundance of caution. And we put in place level 1 through 4 of our staff taking their place of mandatory duty. At the same time, our wonderful volunteer team recruited, no kidding, 1,500 new names. A lot of folks were out of work, a lot of college students who were home. It was quite stunning to see what the community did. Our Meals on Wheels program, right? We're serving 1,800 seniors, but half of them we deliver every day to their doors, 5 days a week. Well, that takes 125 volunteers we didn't have, and that's 5 touch points to their vulnerable population. We use frozen meals with our seniors in rural areas and deliver once a week. So within 3 days, we transferred the whole operation to frozen. It was quite an amazing thing the team did. Great planning, great preparation, and that worked out beautifully. The kitchen, imagine if one of them gets sick and everyone has to go out because you'd have to quarantine. So we had to split the kitchen. Half is in one building now, half is in the other. And through the help of some donors, we were able to get 7 chefs and cooks from around the restaurant industry, which has been so good to us, and we helped them out slightly. It was a great show of support, and they were wonderful. Our agencies, we declared 27 of them to be disaster relief agencies, and those which we could surge food to, if need be, do mobile distributions from. Think of the 3 I mentioned, the cities, but Chesterfield Food Bank is a very large agency of ours, and there's 27 of those around our service area. That's really key. Remember the long lines everybody had around the country that you saw? We were going to have to do that if our infrastructure fell apart, if the agencies, if over 50% of them went away, like in Norfolk, 70% of their agency infrastructure went away. Luckily, our agencies held up and we didn't have to do it. Of those 3 cities, only one of them lost their infrastructure. I, for the life of me, not quite sure why the other 2 abandoned their infrastructure, but that was their call. But we were able to do things on an as normal basis. It's really worked out. And finally, food sourcing. We had a stockpile of food as we always do, but we get 60% of our food from grocery stores. We're over groceried in this town, and the different agencies go pick up on Tuesday, Thursday, Saturdays, and we have all that planned out. But imagine what happens to that when you have a 5X surge, which is exactly what happened when those of us who shop at the grocery stores did that. And then 2 weeks later, the governor made an announcement, and it was a 3X surge. What was kind of interesting to us, and not an all bad thing from an empathy point of view, is everybody got to have a little chance of what it's like to be food insecure. Not quite sure if the food's going to be there at the grocery store. I better go get a lot. And we're blessed to be able to do that. But it was a chance to develop a little empathy. Imagine thinking about that every day, every Friday night, worrying about your kids through the weekend when schools aren't in place. So obviously the supply chains got disrupted. Supplies didn't go away. The supply chains did, and they were able to correct it. And we think that they've learned a lot from it. I'm very in touch with the senior executives of all the major retail groceries, and I think they'll be fine. But it was a tough period. We went for 8 weeks with absolutely no food from grocery stores. Imagine 60% of your supply to none. But we were prepared, and we were able to we were able to handle that. The government flooded us with food because of the trade issues. They buy a lot of food from farmers. We always have a USDA program where they buy commodities and give them to food banks to keep the markets kind of even, and then they did the food to farm tables. So the government just flooded us with food, and luckily, due to our size and our efficiency, we were literally able to accept all of it, which is not the case of many of the food banks around the country. So that's helped a great deal. As we predicted, we got through it. We knew there'd be a huge gap between April and May until the government assistance showed up. And then we predicted that when it came in, because it was a lot, it was 1,200 once and it was 600 a week for unemployment, that the summer would fare pretty well until the end of July when all of that went away. And then it was anyone's guess. So we got through the summer and we did fine. We were about 15 to 30% up in demand. Those 2 months, we had to move about 67% more food on top of the 2 million and change we distribute every month. So it was significant, and with enough planning and the right strategies, it worked out. So now here we are in late July, and we rinse and repeat. However, this time we got much smarter. So the drivers we talk about in our scenarios were the virus, government assistance, the economy, unemployment, and funding for us, and food sourcing. So the virus, still here. This country chose to go sequentially versus simultaneous, and so the curve did not go all the way down. It's still flying at an unfortunate level. So that's with us. It all depends on mask and cultural cooperation. Government assistance is the big unknown. If it stays what it was, then we'll be back to where we were through the summer. If it doesn't, it could be quite something. Unemployment. It was, let's say it was at 4%, and let's assume now conservatively it's at 12%. So that's 8% more. That's a 2x more than what it was. Well, if you take unemployment, I can equate food insecurity to 50% of that. So unfortunately, if we were serving 150,000 food insecure individuals, we now have in our service area 300,000 food insecure individuals we have to work with. And so you can see that it's substantial. At our peak, we were at 210,000. We know we can work through this. If some of this government assistance goes away in January, it will be the perfect storm. If the food doesn't come in, the government assistance isn't enough, and we have 300,000 folks, it'll be substantial, and we'll work through it, but we'll see what becomes of that. Let's see, I guess at the same time, we're trying to get even better with predictive analysis. We're working on an algorithm with Feeding America and McKinsey to see if we can't use unemployment as the main driving variable to get in some predictive analysis to start seeing, once we see that, we can start determining hot spots around our service areas. It is, we GIS map them geographically now and can understand it pretty well, but we can get ahead of the curve even better. So let's talk about the next 10 or 15 years. As I said, we really have to stay in place. We really have to be ready to handle where we go. And the community demands that we stay in business. So what I try to do is look out and get my research and focus on mega trends. I spoke with Peter Schwartz in the Art of the Long View. I kind of glommed onto mega trends from my friend Rich Fairbank, who's still the CEO of Capital One. We were talking one night about 11 o'clock. We had a meeting from 7 to 11. He's a night owl. And he asked me to put in project management in place for the 5th attempt at Capital One, because we had 4 failed attempts. We'd lost tens of millions of dollars recently in failed projects. And I said, golly, we had a great year. How do we have such a great year given these failed projects? And he said, well, what I found is if you find the right wave to ride, the right mega trend, the right mega wave, it forgives a lot of sins. And that's exactly what Rich did, right? He and Nigel were the ones that figured out that not everybody should get $5,000 worth of credit. And they figured out how to do risk analysis. They got into balance transfer. They kind of invented that one and created their own mega wave and mega trend. It was a great competitive barrier to entry. And so Rich was big on that, and it really has paid him well, throughout his time there. And my new favorite in terms of looking out there is Tom Friedman. And so if you take nothing away from today, go out and buy Thomas Friedman's book. I think it's Thanks for Being Late, or Thank You for Being Late. It's a fascinating read. It talks about where the world's going, and he would say with an optimist view. But I'll give you some examples because it really does affect food banking. So let's look at autonomous cars. They'll be around in probably 15 years. My son is working for a firm right now that's already maintaining them and working with them and using them. So let's look at what happens with that auto finance business. There'll probably be about 70% less car ownership in the country. So there'll be lots of fleets of cars, but what happens to auto finance? Oh, and what happens to auto insurance, right? So this is what happens to the 40 to 80 million less jobs in probably 10 to 15 years. These types of things is where the hit will come in. Truck drivers, right? There'll be autonomous trucks. Warehouses, all warehouses will be dark. Amazon has dark warehouses now with automation. Paralegals, the list goes on and on and on. So what does a food bank do when there's 40 to 80 million less jobs? Most unfortunately, COVID has given us a kind of a rehearsal, a dry run on that. Let's look at grocery stores, and we look at those a lot, and Feeding America employs a lot of consultants. 60% of our food comes from them, but in 10 years, about 50% of your food will be delivered to your door. And by the way, that comes from the middle of the grocery store, probably, right? The dry goods. If you go now and look at soup, how the middle of the grocery store is hidden. There's no profit in it. They put you to produce, to the ready-made food, and look at the shrinking soup categories, right? They only make a penny on the can. They'd much rather you go to their ready-made soup. But they're going to put all that in warehouses. It'll be first in, first out inventory, and that'll be shipped to your door. Well, that's the food that gets expired or is ready to or overruns that they have that no longer will come from us. So all that food source will completely dry up. Food drives, that will come. That's only 5% of what we do now, but it's a great brand play for us, and probably that will diminish. Let's look at higher ed, who's been pricing themselves out of business anyway. 50% of people don't graduate from college. So businesses will end up in the future paying for education as opposed to families. Higher ed will go much more probably to the early 1900s, where it's a very small group of folks who can afford it. And businesses will not pay for 4 years, they'll pay for certifications. They're not going to pay for my child's English lit. So with that, what happens with education, and it's just fascinating to see where it's going. And COVID is only accelerating all of this. Look at all the online learning. So the online universities can turn around a curriculum for a business in 6 weeks to 3 months. It takes a university 18 months to create a curriculum. So you can see where those drivers are going to affect that. So how does that affect us? How do we think about that? So seniors in the Age Wave project we had here said transportation would be a big issue. With autonomous cars, not so much now. So that's a big help, right? AI helps an awful lot there. We look at, we're talking about a drone landing pad here at Feedmore to think out there if we build a new building in 10 years, because Amazon will need to drop off food that wasn't picked up. Right now, deadhead trucks come and give us food, but Amazon will have a drone land and put the food there. Drones can already carry 1,000 pounds as we speak. Food purchasing is going to be huge for us. We're building our endowment like you wouldn't believe, because we have to buy an awful lot of food in 10 years, given the retail grocery business. I remember my friend Meg Ham, who's a brilliant leader, the president of Food Line, said, yeah, I'm a retail chain now, but I'll be a distribution system in the future, and not just a retail chain. I worry an awful lot about our low-income clients, and so many of them, education's the driver to income. So we need to find ways to collaborate. So I can't wait to get together with probably my friend Bess Littlefield over at J. Sarge. But community colleges are moving towards certification. Why don't we team up with them, have food be a magnet or part of what they offer for certifications? And I think all of us in this community really need to start thinking about skating to where the puck is going, not where it is. We see problems in front of us, and a bunch of nonprofits get together for 2 years and solve it. And by the way, at the end of that 2 years, the problems of either pass or bigger ones are in front of us. It's like building a building that's too small when you move in. I'm sure no one's ever done that before. And I worry about our community sometimes. That the change is coming. Friedman will tell you the change is coming exponentially, so quick. And we really have to be prepared for that. So let's skate to where the puck is going. And COVID, I think, has given us this, in many ways, dress rehearsal. I'm looking at my time here. I think, you know, we all have the ability to deal with ambiguity. But what should each of us do if you're running a business? I think you've got to build your personal think tank. I think you've got to read an awful lot about where the world is going. We're blessed with that. I wish we had these books when I was early on in business. I think you have to find grounded data, and I think you have to surround yourself with experts. I think you've got to seek out the mega trends. They're there. People write about them. I think always create scenarios and then have the strategies in the case of high risk, the mitigating strategies around those. And I think always, always, always keep the client in the room. You know, I'm an old salesman from IBM, and you always work backwards from the client's needs, or whether I was at Central Fidelity with my friend Nancy, you know, put the client in a room with you, satisfy their needs, work backwards from those, and many things go well. A final observation for you, my friends, is that as I've been around lately, actually throughout my whole life, I have found that the most resilient thing in this life, in this world, is the human spirit. The human spirit. I see it every day with our staff. I see it with our volunteers. I see it with those clients, you know, the 150,000 that we were serving, and now the new 150,000, this new tier, most of them the newly unemployed. Their spirit is indomitable. It's just stunning to watch and see. It's incredibly inspirational. But I'm pretty inspired by you all, I've got to admit. I mean, look at you. This wonderful thing that Stan and Gary have put together that says, hey, life goes on. Self-actualization never ends. And here all of you are. You believe that. It's who you are. It's how you're built. And so good on you. And I know you'll get through this. And with any luck, you'll help lead the rest of this community through it. And I very much look forward to seeing you and talking about it when we're on the other side. So with that, Nancy, I'm happy to take any questions in the time left, but thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Doug.
Absolutely.
There's some wonderful kudos and accolades throughout the chat for you. For everyone to know, Stan actually captures all those and will share those with Doug, so your message will go directly to him. A number of the questions you answered, the 95 paid employees and where the food often comes from, but one of the questions I'm not sure you touched on is what has happened for monetary contributions from private sources during COVID, and any instructions you have for us around that.
Sure. You know, it's stunning in one word. You know, very dicey when the market tanks, but the recovery was quite honestly rather surprising, the rapidity of it. So we fared very well. And at the same time, food banks became kind of the poster child of the virus, right? Oftentimes in a disaster, there's food banks and there's the Red Cross and And so it's been quite something. And we really fared very well. We actually exceeded our goal for the year. The support's been tremendous. Now, that hasn't been spent because we're very concerned about January, February, March. And if things just, the perfect storm hits, we will have to buy an awful lot more food and we'll be ready for it. But it's been inspirational. It's been very humbling, quite honestly, to see from corporations, from individuals, and we may well need yet more. We tried very hard not to raise money on this, Nancy. I don't believe in raising money in disasters. We believe if we do the right work, that good things will happen. And indeed they did. And thank you for all the kudos. I get absolutely none of them. I'm surrounded by some of the most brilliant, passionate people you can imagine. And one small aside, Nancy, it's interesting what happens when you put in good business practices on a nonprofit. When we got here, I think we were moving about 18 million pounds of food. And now we're close to, I think last year, 33 million. We've probably doubled our assets. And we actually have 3 less employees than when I started. So it does show that you can combine the two and run a good business and still, very importantly, keep a big heart.
Excellent. And then the final question, thank you, Doug, is Gary teased us with your hydroponic farming and people are really interested in that. Can you give us a few more details about that?
Yeah, I'd love to. And I wish my dear friend Chuck Metzger was sitting here with me because he's the man that gets all the kudos. But really quickly, we always try to be innovative here and we needed more produce, right? And a lot of farmers till their produce in the ground, particularly the small farmers who do farmers markets at 10 acres. And I said, and I wanted them to give me their level 2s and 3s, right? Which is the not so pretty. We buy level 1s at the store and at farmers markets. And it's a logistics business too. So I went to my friends at Produce Source Partners and said, why aren't you buying from my 10-acre farmers? They said, well, it's a logistics business. We'd rather go to a 400-acre farm than a small one. So I had this idea. I'd go invest in a refrigerated building, recruit 40 10-acre farmers, have them put their food in one part of it, and then pick the level 2s and 3s for the food bank. And we create a new market for them, a wholesale market, if you will, on top of that. And my friend Chuck, who you know was a very wonderful and well thought of executive at Mercer, has a home out in Northern Neck also, and he wanted to give back to them. So he joined in as the lead volunteer, went to 75 farmers, tried to talk them all into it 2 and 3 times. We never got there. They couldn't quite figure out the business equation, but Chuck fell in love with hydroponics. And there's a couple folks who had that out there, and he just took it from there. We joined in with a guy named John May in Northern Neck, another great executive leader in technology firms in Northern Virginia. And Chuck has been just indefatigable, and it's just grown and grown. So it really is it's a commercial enterprise. It is loose leaf lettuce, a number of varieties, hydroponic facility. And we're really, guess what? We're riding the mega trends again. So healthy food, healthy eating, big mega trend. Local, big mega trend. No pesticides, big mega trend. Sustainable. We recycle 95% of the water. Look at the carbon footprint of getting loose leaf greens from Goochland to the stores in 2 days versus being in a truck from California for 7 to 9 days. Really innovative packaging, and of course a brand that's all about giving back, right? Little Leaf's Big Heart. We'll be giving 5% of our food to Feedmore, which stunningly will be about 50,000 pounds of greens, because we'll produce about 1.2 million pounds a year. It's 27 times more productive than the ground. And really it's the future of farming. And people ask why, and it's because of weather. Weather is very destructive. The guy from Canada said, you guys in Virginia get all your rain in 30 minutes. We in Canada get it in 2 days. So you'll see more and more. 75% of produce in Europe is hydroponic. So stay tuned for Greenswell growers. We're going to work on the brand. We hope to get construction started here early this fall and have product by the end of 21. And it'll be something that the shelf life will be fantastic. The quality of product will be great, and giving back to the community is really who we are. And Chuck Metzger is our lead partner and our spokesperson. So he'll be the guy, and I'm just happy to be his friend and proud to be part of it. So it's a fascinating thing. And it says there's, and by the way, that's another career for Chuck, just like all of you all working through where you're headed, and me and John. So it's just great. And thanks for that question.
Excellent. Stan, I'm going to pass it back to you to wrap us up and add your thanks to everybody else's for an amazing presentation.
Thank you, Nancy, and thank you, Doug. That was wonderful. As Nancy said, there are lots of good comments going, and I will share those with you. And we will probably be back to see here to